Thank you everyone for joining us today for our marketing Your Territory, all about trademarks with David Walker, presented by the SBDC. So just a little bit about our local Shasta-Cascade Small Business Development Center here. We are located in Northern California and cover the counties of Shasta, Trinity, and Siskiyou counties. We're a nonprofit organization and we provide confidential no-cost advisory services as well as low to no-cost training services, just like this presentation today. We are primarily funded by the SBA and the state of California. So they are able to provide that funding for us to be able to, do the no-cost advising for you. And then before we get going, I just have to read this disclaimer. So the information provided in this webinar and any supplementary materials provided to registrants are intended for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute professional, financial, or legal advice. No registrant shall act or fail to act on the basis of any material contained in this webinar without obtaining proper financial, legal, or other professional advice specific to their situation. The Northern California Small Business Development Center and its host, the Cal Poly Humboldt Sponsored Programs Foundation, specifically disclaims any liability, loss or risk, personal or otherwise, which is incurred as a consequence, directly or indirectly, of the use and application of any of the information presented in this webinar. And I also wanted to mention, if you have any questions during the webinar, you can put them in the chat and then we will get to those as we are able, or at least at the end of the presentation. And then we're also going to provide you with a copy of the PowerPoint as well as the recording of this within a couple of business days after today. So with that, I will go ahead and hand it off to our presenter, David Walker.
Hi, thank you, Emily. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate that. My name is David Walker. It's a little bit about me. Nobody wants to know about me, so we'll just continue going on. I am an advisor right now to the SBDC in Shasta and Trinity and Siskiyou counties, like Emily mentioned. And I do have some experience with trademarks and intellectual property and all that other fascinating stuff. So what we'll be going after today, we'll have a little introduction. We'll talk about what a trademark is, a little bit about them, a little bit about registrations, what infringement and dilution looks like, and some ideas on a business strategy for when you should get a trademark, what it does for you, and whether it makes sense or not. So with that, let me give a little bit of an introduction. This is how there's several things involved in intellectual property as a whole. Patents, copyrights, trademarks, and you can also add trade secrets. That's part of your intellectual property that you would have in a business. And patents protect an invention, a method, or a design. Copyrights protect ideas and expressions. Trademarks, which is what we're talking about, are words, phrases, symbols, or some other mark that will distinguish your product and your brand from everybody else. Okay, it's different from a business name. It can be your business name, but it's not protected in the same way. You register your business name with your state or your local municipality. It's not a domain name. You register your internet domain name with ICANN, which is done through your internet service provider usually. With a trademark, if you want to register your trademark, you do that through the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. If you don't register it, your name is still protected. The trademark is still protected wherever it's used, when it's used properly. But if you want nationwide protection, you register it with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. And we'll talk a little more about that. What is a trademark? A trademark is a brand name or a distinguisher, okay? It's something that identifies your product or your brand and distinguishes you from other products and brands in the marketplace. It can be a word, name, symbol, or any combination in use or intended to be used to identify and distinguish the goods or services of one seller or provider of those services from another. And that's the key. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office looks at it as looks at the idea of registering trademarks as a way to prevent confusion in the marketplace. That's the bottom line. You don't want two Pepsis out there. You don't want two Coca-Colas. You want a Pepsi and you want a Coca-Cola so that everybody knows what it is they're getting. And that's what the trademark provides. So a trademark will protect your brand. It can be a word, a name, a symbol. Believe it or not, it can be a sound or a smell. There's been, if you think of Intel and their 4 tones, NBC and its 3 tones, the MGM roar, the lion roar, those are sounds that have been trademarked. And there's actually been smells that have been trademarked, believe it or not. Play-Doh has a smell that they trademarked or registered the trademark. There's a flowery musk scent that is used in Verizon stores that's been granted a trademark. And somebody mentioned that these scents don't necessarily smell better than aromas, but they have better lawyers. Anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. Anyway, but that word, name, or symbol, that thing that you're trademarking that distinguishes your brand from another, it needs to be unique and not generic. You can't trademark the word television, right? You can't trademark monitor or computer, but you can't register those, or you can't claim that those are your trademark. It needs to be something unique and not something that's generic and used in everyday language. And it distinguishes and identifies one brand for another. And as we said, we're looking at avoiding confusion in the marketplace. Ideally, it is something that you already have in use. If you have something that you want to trademark or register the trademark before it's in use in the marketplace, before you're selling the thing, you can register it up to about 6 months beforehand. And by the time that 6 months is ended, you need to be using it in the marketplace, or you basically have to go through the process again. And you can register your trademark. We'll talk about the differences in a little bit. How do you get a trademark? If you use a unique name or a unique brand in commerce properly without infringing on somebody else, then you have a trademark automatically. In the same way you create a copyright and create material, you've already got a copyright because you created it. But just by virtue of the fact that you're using it, you without infringing, you have a trademark. And if you're doing that, you can use the designation TM. You may have seen that on a logo or something. They'll put a TM. That means that that's a company that's saying, hey, this is our trademark, and they're telling everybody that's our mark. The issue with that is you're protected wherever you're using it in the US. I'm talking about US law here, by the way, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give legal advice. But if you use it within the US, you're protected wherever it is you use it and wherever it is you're using it first. If you register it with the US Patent and Trademark Office, then you have protection throughout the US, throughout the 50 states. I was going to say 48 states. There's 50 of them. Anyway, and if you register it with the Patent and Trademark Office, then you can use the symbol, the R with the circle around it that you may have seen. That means you've registered your trademark with the Patent and Trademark Office, and it's protected in the US. So what does a trademark protect? Word, phrase, symbol, something that is used to distinguish your product and service from somebody else. If it's a product, it's called a trademark. If you do a service, technically it's a service mark, but for our purposes, we're going to use the names interchangeably. And sometimes when you see a service mark, instead of the TM, they'll use an SM for service mark. You're doing a service instead of providing a product. You would use SM instead of TM. How do you get it? You get it through using it. And you can claim it anytime you use it legally. You sell a product in Sacramento or Roseville or something, and you're not infringing, then you have the rights to that in those areas. Like I said, if you register it with the federal government, then you can use the R with a circle around it, and you have protection throughout the US. You can also register it within the state. State of California allows you to register a trademark, and I think all the states do. And then you have protection within the state of California. But keep in mind, the federal registration trumps the state registration. And I'll give you later on, I'll give you an example or two of when that's come into conflict and what's happened. What rights do you get from it? No one can use your mark to sell similar stuff or to blur or tarnish your brand. That's what you get from having a trademark registered. You're protecting your brand from somebody claiming to be your brand, and you protect it from somebody trying to tarnish or slur your brand. We'll have a couple examples of that later too. This is the slide I thought might interest you. We won't go through them obviously, but these are some trademark names that you've probably heard of with the generic names and the owners. Some things that you may not have known were trademarked. Hula hoop is actually the generic name is a toy hoop, and Whammo owns it. Super glue is that cayenne or whatever adhesive, which is owned by the Super Glue Corporation. So you can look at that. We're going to send you these slides. You can look at that and be suitably impressed. Again, a trademark, a word, a symbol, a phrase, or other characteristic to distinguish one brand from another. Coke from Pepsi, NBC from CBS. It should be creative and distinctive. You see this, golden arches, you kind of know what it is. You see the Intel logo, you know what it is. I don't know if this will work. Let's see. How about that? It worked. Yeah. Intel registered that trademark for that, for those tones. It's interesting. In fact, there's if you're that interested, at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office website, USPTO.gov, they have a page that lists sounds that are trademarked. It's quite a list, and kind of entertaining just to go through and see some sounds that have gotten a registration for their trademark. It's interesting. And another side note while I'm thinking of it, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has a series of videos on their website, USPTO.gov, that goes through the method of applying for a registration for the trademark, and it talks about trademarks. In my opinion, the videos have a lot of really good information, kind of cheesy a little bit, but it's it's okay. They've got a lot of really good information and put forth in a really easy to understand form. So you might want to check those out as well. So again, we keep going over the same thing. It's a word or phrase that distinguishes your brand from someone else. The idea is that it should be creative and distinctive. It should have a meaning that immediately calls the product or service to mind. And it will need to be in a U.S. Patent and Trademark Office designated class. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has a series of classes, I think there's 45 of them, basically categories. And when you register your trademark with the USPTO, you say which class you want your trademark to be in. And I gave a couple of examples here. There's two very well-known companies named Apple. One was founded by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. The other is the Beatles. One is for computers, cell phones, and technology. Another one is for music and entertainment. Same name, two trademarks registered with the US government in two different classes. I'll give you an idea. So they're not infringing on each other. And the term, the one thing about trademarks, with patents expire after a decade or two of use. Trademarks continue as long as they're in use and not abandoned, basically. Some of the oldest trademarks around, the Shell trademark has been around since 1904. Levi Strauss since 1886. And I read that Stella Artois has had that logo, that basic logo, since 1366. Now, I read that. It's not like I wrote it down and read it. Somebody else wrote it down and read it. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's an interesting concept anyway. The trademark will last as long as you don't abandon it. It continues to be in use. And your registration will last as long as you keep renewing it every 5 or 10 years, depending on, well, we'll go through that too, but depending on when you file. So a little more about trademarks. It identifies your brand, you and your product. It can be your business name, it can be your logo, it can be a slogan or a tagline, it can be your color scheme, and it can be elements of your product. John Deere registered its yellow and green color scheme. UPS registered its brown color as unique trademarks. So within agricultural equipment, John Deere has that color scheme protected. Within transportation, logistics, I suppose, and shipping, UPS has their brown color scheme protected. Interestingly, a little side note, Cheerios tried to register the yellow that they had on their box, and they were denied. Why they were denied, I'm not sure. Could be that the yellow is used, that particular yellow is used in other cereals. I'm not really sure what the situation was, but little side note. And then I talked about smells. There are very few smells that are trademarked, but there are some. One company tried once to get the smell of strawberries protected because it was closely associated with their company. They failed, by the way, because the trademark office said that the smell of strawberries is too widespread in industry to be trademarked. So, and well, this may be interesting. Lamborghini registered, and I'm going to read this to you, the unique motion in which the door of a vehicle is opened. The doors move parallel to the body of the vehicle, but are gradually raised above the vehicle in a parallel position. And they were able to get a registration on that. So there are a lot of things that could be registered. The most things that are registered, though, are obviously business names, logos, slogans, and that's really what most of the public is going to identify your product with anyway. So let's look at a little bit about what's easy to get in terms of trademarking registrations and what you just simply are not going to be able to get. Registrations that are what they call coined, like Pepsi and Oreo, they're really a combination of letters that outside of the product itself, they have no meaning. Pepsi, Oreo, they don't have any real meaning outside of the product itself. They're unique, they're called coined or fanciful, and so they're fairly easy to get because nobody else is out there using those kind of terms. Then there's arbitrary, and we mentioned Apple. You know, that's an apple is a piece of fruit, right? Amazon is a rainforest in South America, and yet Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak were able to register Apple for their computer and iPhone company, which makes sense because otherwise, how does Apple associate with that? How does a rainforest, Amazon, associate itself with somebody who sells books and other things online? Those are called arbitrary marks. They don't really have an association with the product based on what the names mean. And so there's no connection with the real product that they're selling. And those are fairly easy to get as well. When you start getting hard to get is when you start thinking about things that are suggestive of what the product can do. Copper tone, suntan lotion is one thing. Caress, the toilet paper. They suggest what their products can do without coming out and naming the product. And those can be a little more difficult to get. And then you have ones that are even more difficult to get beyond that. And those are ones that are descriptive. And I brought two that are, both of them are out of business now, I believe, but Computerland, they sold computers. They're being descriptive. We're Computerland. Then there's Radio Shack. You know, they sell radios and radio equipment, Radio Shack. They're descriptive marks. They identify specifically what they sell, and those are difficult to get. And if you tried to register computer or radio, you would not be able to get it because those are considered generic. It would be like trying to register the term hardware store or RV park or something like that. But together with Computerland, together with Radio Shack, they were able to register the trademarks. So again, the strongest marks and the easiest ones to get are the coined or arbitrary marks. They're easier to get and easier to protect post-registration. But there's a risk, or there's a trade-off rather with these. They present the toughest marketing challenge for a new and small business because, I mean, we all know what Pepsi is because Pepsi's been around for decades. They're a very successful company. If you're going to start a new company and you have a new idea and a new product and you name it something completely arbitrary or fanciful like we're talking about, then you've got to work to make the association with your product. So it presents the toughest marketing challenge for a small business, but at the same time, they're going to be the easiest ones to get the approval you're gonna want from the Patent and Trademark Office when you go for registration. So let's talk about registration a little bit. Again, using the TM, you can do, if you're selling your product in commerce today, if you're offering your services today, you can use a TM or an SM designation today. It's common law rights. As long as you're using the mark legitimately, you're the first to use it in commerce where you're using it, you can have protection where your market is, where you're selling your products, where you're offering your services. You can also, and you can use the TM and designation to tell everybody this is my mark. You can get a state registration through the California Secretary of State, and you can get protection through California, and it notifies the public who owns that trademark there in California, and it protects you in the state of California. A federal registration, which you get through United States Patent and Trademark Office, it offers national protection. It becomes the basis for your foreign protection, because another thing that the federal registration does is it allows the U.S. Customs Office to prevent counterfeit products coming in from overseas that are trying to use your registration, trying to use your mark, which is a bonus of having the federal registration. And I thought I'd mention this, which is a pretty interesting, in my view anyway, it's an interesting example of what first to market and state registrations do for you in terms of compared with what a federal registration would do. In the early 50s, there was a small, they're still around by the way, a small milkshake company called, that began selling burgers, and they named their company Burger King. They're in a small town called Mattoon, Illinois. Later, a few years after they had already been up and running, a larger company named Burger King got a federal trademark registration for Burger King and began expanding across the US. This small Burger King, little Burger King in Mattoon, Illinois, had a state registration in the state of Illinois. Burger King, Big Burger King, got a federal registration later. And when Big Burger King came to Illinois, they wanted to set up shop near Mattoon, and Little Burger King said, you can't do that. We were here first. We got a state registration for our trademark. And it went to court. And the upshot of the whole thing was the court said, yeah, a federal registration is, outdoes a state registration, but Little Burger King was there first. And so to this day, within a 20-mile radius of Little Burger King there in Mattoon, Illinois, Big Burger King cannot set up a franchise. I read that at one time Burger King offered them something like $10,000 to allow them to set up a franchise within a 20-mile radius there of Mattoon, Illinois, and they told them no. So yeah, that's what had Little Burger King gotten a federal trademark to begin with, things might have been different. That would have been really interesting. Yeah, that gives you an idea. Being the first in the market can be very beneficial. Getting a state registration helps, and it's cheaper than a federal registration. But usually it's not that much cheaper, and a federal registration might be best. Some of the pros and cons of federal registrations. The pros, as we said, it provides a nationwide protection, gives you the right to sue in federal court if there's an infringement, and it enables the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol protection that we talked about a few minutes ago. The cons are you already have your trademark rights available without registration, just through common law. There are fees to acquire it and maintain, although the fees aren't that much. One thing you do get that I found out when I did my first federal registration, you get a lot of unwanted solicitations and a lot of people that try, in my view, it's a scam where they try to get you to pay them money to maintain the registration or to do some other service for you. Other than that, to me, a federal trademark registration makes sense. So how do you get a federal registration? The first thing you should do is do a search. Look at the USPTO.gov database. They have a database called TESS, T-E-S-S, and you can search within the category. I mentioned that there's different categories for, they call them classes, classifications, different classes for different products. Search the database for your mark and make sure there's, that it's free, that make sure that it's available to you. Another place you can search is Google, and that I strongly encourage you to do that. Just look and see what are your competitors doing? What the names are they offering? Consider homophones, words that sound the same, because remember, when you're going after a federal trademark registration, what we're trying to do, what the feds are trying to do, is prevent confusion in the marketplace. So if you're suggesting a trademark that sounds like something that's already registered, you're probably not going to get it. Years ago, I was helping a company that wanted to register the name Baron for their products, B-A-R-O-N. And they did a search. They searched the USPTO.gov database. They searched Google. They searched other industry publications within their industry, and they looked to be free and clear as near as they could tell in terms of being able to get the registration. When they submitted the application, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office denied it because somebody had registered the name Nanjue, and I believe that's the spelling, N-A-N-J-U-E, which to me made no sense until they explained it. Apparently, in Mandarin, Baron is pronounced Nanjue, or something like that. Somebody had previously, another company in the same industry, had registered the term Baron in Mandarin with the anglicized letters, And the Patent and Trademark Office felt that because there is such a large Mandarin-speaking population within the United States, that there was a potential for serious confusion in the marketplace, and they denied the people that were trying to register Baron. So there's a lot of things to consider when you're thinking about going after a registration for a trademark, and when you're thinking about when you're thinking about what it is you want to you want to trademark, what your what the name of your product is going to be. Like I said, you want to look at the classes. There are 45 classes in all, products and services, and LegalZoom has a really good listing of the classes and their descriptions. So when you're thinking about the registration, you know, go to LegalZoom. Like I said, you'll have these slides. You'll be able to see, or you could just look it up on Google. And you'll be able to see the complete list. So if you're selling, I don't know, if you're selling burgers or whatever, you'll be able to go to food, whatever, and you'll see what that number is for the classification. And you can look on the USPTO database under that classification and do a search and see if your name is available, if what it is you're going after is available. The basic procedure for applying for a federal registration, you can do it online or on paper. The application may seem daunting when you first look at it, but in reality, it's not that bad. I mentioned there's a video available online at uspto.gov. Look at that video. It'll show you what you need to do. It's not really rocket science. One of the first questions is, are you an attorney? It'll ask for your information. It'll ask for information on your mark. If you're registering, it'll ask for the goods and the services, what class you're going after. If you're registering a name, you'll have to put that in. If you're registering a logo, you'll want to upload a JPEG of the logo. You're going to do the basis for filing. If you're using the mark now, you can call your basis 1A. That means you're already using the mark in commerce, and you're going to have to provide a example of how you're using it in commerce. If you intend to use it in commerce, then later on you're going to have to provide within 4 or 6 months. Not sure exactly what it is. You're going to have to provide that proof in order to maintain the application. You basically have to upload specimens showing the overall context and how the mark is used. And there's very specific things they'll accept and things that they won't accept. If you're selling a product and you upload a brochure, a lot of times they won't accept that. But if you can show them a price tag with the logo on it, or the product with the logo on it, or the mark, you know, or the name, whatever it is you're trying to get registered, that generally will be acceptable. Correspondence information, your oath saying, yea, verily, this is real. You sign it and you send them, last I looked, about $250 per class. So if you're just registering in one class, the fee is going to be about $250. If you're going to do 2 classes, I believe it's another $250. But the USPTO will send you a verification and acknowledgement that they received your application. Your fee will depend on the number of trademarks you're going after, and it can be a number of different things because you may want to register the name. For instance, Starbucks registered the name Starbucks. They registered their logo for Starbucks. They registered Starbucks, as you can see there, in some kind of, I think it might be Mandarin, I'm not real sure. Yeah, each one of those is going to require a registration. There are 45 different classes of trademarks. Each one you do will incur an additional fee. There's an online form. If you are, so you can, if you do it online, it's one fee. If you do it through the post office, it's another. If your filing basis is 1A, your registration, and you're doing it online, your registration is going to cost about $250. If it's 1B, it can be more because you're going to have to register some now and then some later. After you start using it in commerce, you've got to add more stuff and it costs more. If you're going to use legal outside help like LegalZoom, you need to pay for them to do that as well. LegalZoom will do it fairly inexpensively. Attorneys, well, they'll probably charge more. Then there's maintenance fees. Between 5 and 6 years after the registration, you're going to have to make a maintenance fee. Basically, you file to maintain the trademark. You tell the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, yeah, I'm continuing, and there's a fee there. Between 9 and 10 years, you have to do a second maintenance fee, and after that, you just keep it going every 10 years. You continue and you file a maintenance fee, and as long as you're selling the product, as long as you're using it in commerce, using the product or your services in commerce, you can maintain the trademark protection. Use it in commerce and pay the fee. If you have questions, here are some things you can do. And I would encourage you to ask the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. My experience with them is that they're friendly, they're easy to talk to. They won't give you legal advice, but they're very, very clear about what it is you need to do. And it's worth considering. You could hire an attorney, but you have to pay them. You could use an online service, but you also have to pay them. It's probably cheaper, but you have to put up with their marketing because after you use LegalZoom or somebody like that, they're going to want you to use them for something else. And so they're going to barrage you with a lot of really great offers. You can also contact us. Contact the SBDC. If you're not in Shasta, Trinity, or Siskiyou County, you can contact the one near you. There's an SBDC covering every county in the United States. And they have staff that are experts in different areas of business. Contact your local SBDC. Ask them to give you a hand. And we may have the answer to your question as well. A little bit about infringement and dilution. Infringement protects the consumer. Someone tries to make people think they're you. A few years ago in China, they had a company called New Boom. And look at this, that logo look familiar? New Balance didn't like that, and New Balance actually was successful in suing a Chinese company for trademark infringement. They apparently had a trademark, or I don't know if they had the trademark in China or if they were trying to put them in the United States or what, but they successfully sued in Chinese court. They successfully sued a Chinese company for trademark infringement. Now, dilution protects the mark. And I have an example here of a famous mark that was blurred and tarnished and went to court to stop what was happening, and it worked. It was Ben & Jerry's ice cream. They filed a suit against actually a company that was trying to make porn using their logo and calling it Ben & Jerry's, and they successfully stopped them. This was about 10 years ago. So and they were able to do that in federal court because they had filed a federal registration on their trademark. So let's talk a little bit about business strategies. If you're going to pursue a trademark registration, make a timeline and a budget, select the classes you want to search. You want to keep the filing broad, but not too broad. If there's people out there using the mark before you, think about consent and coexistence agreements, and we'll touch on all of these a little bit. Think about the use of your mark and in marketing and trends. Use common sense and be ready to actively defend your mark. If you're not going to defend it, why are you doing it? Anyway, make a timeline and a budget. Again, you want to make sure you're using it in commerce. Otherwise, it's going to cost more. It has to do with the structure of the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office fees. If you're filing before you start using it in commerce, it's going to cost more than if you wait until your first sale and then file. When you acquire the registration, there's a federal filing, obviously, and you get the border control benefit. And think about when you're going to schedule your marketing activities. Think about budgeting for that. Think about budgeting for the defense of your mark in case somebody infringes, and what you're going to do. It's going to cost, if somebody's infringing your mark, it's going to cost you to have an attorney write a cease and desist letter. So think about things like that. Select where and what classes to search. Again, Google will be a little bit of a godsend here. USPTO, you can search by class. Look at your competition. One of the things you can do, perhaps, is in some areas, local law schools will have some of their students under the supervision of the law professor, will have some of their students help with things like this, patents, trademarks, and help with filings. See if there's one in your area that might be willing to do that. A lot of times they do that, and they do that at, for free or for very, very little money. I know I've actually used those in a previous life. It may or may not be available to you wherever you're at. And also beware of some search firms. A lot of times, and this is especially true in patents more so than trademarks, but there are firms out there that will say, hey, we'll help you search for your intellectual property. And then, oh my goodness, guess what? There's nothing out there preventing you from filing your patent or filing your trademark. So, hey, hire us and we'll go do it for you. A lot of times with the trademark, it's just cheaper to file the trademark for $250 per class. You file the trademark yourself, and a lot of times that's cheaper than what us, and a lot less hassle than what a search firm may want to charge you to go figure it out. So, $250, go ahead and file the mark if you are sure that if you find no reason through Google or your competition or the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, if it looks free and clear, it costs $250 to file. Just file and see. You want to see if you can make the filing broad, but you don't want it too broad. There's a balance here. You need to be cognizant of the categories because you have to have a bona fide intent to use the mark in U.S. commerce, or you need to be actually using it in U.S. commerce on all the listed goods and services. So if you're going after multiple categories, especially, you need to, you don't want to just file for all these categories. You want for all categories, despite what they're using. You only want to file where you're using the mark. And you want to keep it broad, but you don't want it too broad. What I mean by that is logos, for instance. Maybe you don't want to identify your color, because if you identify the color, you're only protecting the color, and maybe you want to file, maybe you want to be able to use other color combinations, things like that. The idea is you want to protect what it is you're doing and in a bona fide, real way, because if you try to file in areas where you're not really using the mark and you get challenged, you can lose the entire mark completely in all areas. That's a risk that you may be faced with if you try to do something like that. If you find someone who's using a similar mark as you, one of the things you can consider is to approach them and see if you can live together peacefully. Maybe there's a deal that can be made to allow both of you to use the marks, an agreement that says you use it for this area, they use it for that. Maybe it's geographic, maybe it's certain parts of the industry. Just be aware of two things if you're going to consider that. First, if you approach them down the road, you may be, that the fact that you approach them may be used as evidence that you're admitting their file has validity, that you're admitting that their mark has validity. So they may use that against you in future litigation. The second thing is be willing to walk away from your mark if you go this route, because if you can't make a deal with them, it might be best for you to just choose a different logo, choose a different mark, choose a different name or whatever. That might be, you need to have a willingness to walk away if you're going to go this route. When you're thinking about the market and thinking about trends, think about being consistent, relative, an automatic and positive connection with the potential customer and the mark. Think about those things when you're thinking about the market. I know these are very broad, and I'm speaking in very broad terms, but your mark is an extremely important, stating the obvious here, is an extremely important element of your business. It's an extremely important element of your marketing plan. So make sure that it's used consistently, plan to use it consistently, and relevant in the right places. You want to use the mark where your customers are, and you want to use it linking it to your product in a positive way so that the connection is automatic. When we think of Pepsi, we think of the soda. The connection's automatic. Think of Golden Arches, you think of McDonald's. The connection's automatic. You see the swoosh, you think of Nike. It's automatic. That's what we're going for. And you think about that with the marketing trends. If you're using a mark in connection with a marketing trend, there's a danger there when the trend goes away. You don't want to be seen as passé. You don't want to be seen as old and irrelevant. So another thing to consider. And use common sense. Do you understand the term you're using in your mark? Make sure you do. Make sure you understand, and make sure there is no connotation you're not aware of in other languages. Again, common sense. Just make sure you understand the mark really, really well. And again, if you're not willing to defend it, if 5 years from now somebody is infringing, if you're not willing to spend the money to go after them, then why are you messing with it in the first place? It's something that you need to ask yourself and something that you need to think about. A lot of times it might make sense to do it whether you're willing to defend it or not. I'll say this, it might make sense simply for the marketing value. If you're able to say it's a registered trademark, that maybe that R with a circle around it, maybe the marketing value of that, people see it, it lends validity to the product to some degree because it's a federal registration. There's some level of validity along with that. Maybe it's worth that, maybe in marketing alone, maybe. And again, actively defend it, protect your brand, protect your identity, and use the opportunity with the U.S. Customs Office. So that's what I've got. Where are we at? 10:50. That's just about right. So we've got about 10 minutes if you have any questions or if you want to discuss anything. Emily, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here, and we do have a couple questions in the chat for you.
Okay.
So first question here, would a link to a website count as proof? So they said they don't have any price tags on their products because they sell online mostly, like website, Etsy, etc.
Selling online, usually, usually it wouldn't be a link to the website. It would be a JPEG of the website itself. And yeah, when you're offering services, I should have been clearer about that. When you're offering services, or you're selling something online like that, a lot of times a brochure would be okay in that case, right? Because you're offering services or something like that. So if you're selling online, your website that shows the pricing of that is probably all right. Another good question for the USPTO, and ask them specifically what it is they would be looking for in your particular case. And believe me, they are very easy to deal with. And my experience anyway is they'd be happy to help you with that. But yeah, that's what you would do in that case.
Okay. The next question is someone has a company that has 3 words in it. So they're wanting to know if they should search all of the 3 words together or to search in pairs.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you're going to hate the answer. It depends. But yeah, I would search for all 3 words. Because when you do, let me give you an example. Maybe this will help. I was back in the Stone Age. I was working with a company that had a new product, and we called it the SCAP RFID tag. Okay, RFID tag. That was 3 words. SCAP RFID tag. Okay. You can't register RFID. You can't register tag. You can't register RFID tag. Those are generic terms, right? It'd be like trying to register a computer, or whatever. But SCAP RFID tag is a registered trademark. At least it was. I don't know if it still is or not. But it got the registration, and we had to do, with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, we did a disclaimer saying we're not trying to say just RFID or just RFID tag, but SCAP RFID tag, yes, we're registering that phrase. So yeah, that's probably what you would do. I'm thinking your situation might be a little different from that, and maybe that would be a good question for your SBDC advisor. Really get into it. Maybe even your LegalZoom guy if you decide to go through them to register the trademark.
Cool.
Does that make sense? I don't know. If it doesn't make sense, let me know.
Yeah, put it in the chat if we need clarification. So another question, and I'm not sure if this one was relating to the website or not, but someone's asking, what would be the difference if it's for intellectual property versus products?
Okay. If it's when you're registering, if you're registering intellectual property is basically one of 4 things in the way I define intellectual property anyway, and maybe we're not defining it the same way. It's either, you have 4 methods of intellectual property: patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. Okay, so if what you're saying is you want to trademark an idea, that may not be something you can trademark. An idea that would be perhaps a patent. You have an innovation, an innovative idea, a new method or a new product or something that hasn't been out before and you want to protect it, that would be a patent. A trademark protects the name of a brand or a logo or a slogan, something like that that's associated with a product or a service. If you were calling your service, if you had a unique name for a service, you would trademark the name of the service. But if you had an idea for something that had never been done before, that would be a patent. That's a different animal. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question you had or if I'm not understanding it correctly, but.
Okay, yeah, so just put it in the chat if you need clarification. So going on to the next question.
Okay.
Let's see, so sorry, just kind of scrolled past. So when do you decide to start using a trademark? As they said, I'm just starting out and first trying to get into farmers markets.
What I would do is, remember, you can use the TM pretty much immediately. As soon as you're starting to sell products, start using the TM. And if you've decided to go after a federal registration, you can do that once you started using it in commerce. First use in commerce is when you're allowed to get the registration approved by the, or issued or approved or whatever the term is, by the patent office. So yeah, the first time you sell something is when you go after a registration. But as soon as you're offering products, as soon as you're starting to sell them, I would go ahead and use the TM.
Cool. All right, so for the next question, someone's asking, should they trademark their DBA name or their legal business name?
You have protection for the business name already because of the fact that you're using it, you've registered it with the municipal or local authorities or whatever. If you want to protect it nationwide, you can, and you're selling in commerce and you've got that name as your brand, if that's part of your brand, then yeah, you can trademark that. But there's already protections, like if you have an LLC and you register that in the state of California, then nobody can open an LLC with the same name as you in the state of California. They do the name search, the business name search. And so you have that protection already. So it's something you need to weigh and something you need to look at with your marketing plan. If you're worried about somebody stealing your name and using it in the same industry that you're in and putting their products, then you might want to look at ways you can trademark it. But you know, if they're using it in a different state or in a different area, because like your name, your business name, your LLC is going to be protected in California, but in Nevada, it may not be protected in Nevada. So the way you would protect it would be to keep your name on the products and services that you're offering, and have those protected with the trademark. So yeah, it becomes part of your marketing strategy, whether you're protecting, you know, your business name is protected in the state, you know, that you're already in. That may be sufficient, especially if your product is going to have a different name than your business name. It's you know, simply a matter of what your marketing strategy is. I hope that makes sense.
Awesome. And then last question that we have so far, someone's just wanting to confirm that if they do their due diligence, can they safely DIY their trademark name?
Probably. It's if you do the search and if everything looks good, you've done the USPTO.gov, you've done the Google, you've looked at your competitors and you think you're free and clear, I would encourage you to do a couple of things. First, watch the videos. They're a warning, they're a little cheesy, but they're very informative. Watch the videos on USPTO.gov, the videos about trademarks and about getting the registration. And you can do it yourself. A lot of people, if you have trouble with it or if you have questions, you contact your SBDC. But yeah, I mean, I was able to do it. If I can do it, believe me, just about anybody can do it, because I'm definitely not the smartest bulb, the brightest bulb in the chandelier, or whatever you say. So I mean, it's not as difficult as it might appear to be. Once you get going, it'll be once you get going on the website, it's a lot easier than it looks. But yeah, go through the video. There's a number of them, but go through the videos and you'll get a good idea of what it is you need to do. And yeah, I think you can DIY it. I really do.
Okay, and then any final questions for David before we wrap up?
While you're thinking about that, I put up here some contact information for the Shasta-Cascade SBDC. That's Emily's email address up there. That's the website. If you're not in our area, you can find an SBDC near you simply by clicking on that link and letting them know where you're at. Or you can just go to Google and look up SBDC and put in your county or your city, and the local office will come up. And the services are free. They're already, well, they're already paid for by your tax dollars, so you might as well use them. And you can get answers to pretty much any question there. If you want to contact me, that's Emily's. My email is david@norcalsbdc.org, or you can contact Emily and ask her to get in touch with me or whatever. That's fine. I don't mind at all. And check out our social media stuff. We've got some really cool stuff on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, not so much, but YouTube. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, David.